Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast. What have we got for you in today's show? It's show number 227. It's Wednesday, the 30th of March. It's a fairly grey and miserable day here in London at the moment. It's weather's cooled down dramatically after some lovely warm days, but got plenty of news to keep you busy. The UK is lifting tariffs on US bike brands. In Vietnam, police scooters are being fitted with fire extinguishers to form a fast response fire team. The UK's new EV strategy is already under fire from various groups, including Motorcycle Action Group. Riders in Arizona, however, can now filter, but only between stopped traffic. I don't normally reach deep into my pocket for cosmetic parts for motorcycles, but if I owned a KTM 390 Adventure, a bike I have to admit has tickled my fancy, I might just buy a pair of these aftermarket panels. Something that escaped me a few days ago was the Tiger 660 Tour is out on the road, taking the bikes around for test rides, and there are plenty of dates left, so I'll just give you an update on that. And then today's final point is all about technology and how much of it we need on motorcycles, and specifically, do bikes need power steering? Because Yamaha seems to think so. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 odd minutes whilst you join me for the live webcast. Now, don't forget, if you have any comments, any questions, anything you want to ask, do drop me a line. I'm more than happy to answer them. Why is that not coming up? There it is. That's just a little banner which tells you that. I'm always happy to get feedback on the show as well, so drop me a line with anything you want to say. I will try and answer during the show if I possibly can, but if I can't do it during the show, I will get back to you at the end of it. And we've already got Kevin looking in. Good morning, Kevin. Good to see you here. Right. Okay. So the first thing I really want to just mention, just a quick reminder, Wednesday, the 6th of April at 8 p.m. in the evening is the next live Science of Being Seen full presentation. Now, you probably know by now that Science of Being Seen is a talk about human visual perception and motorcycle conspicuity issues, and explains how it is that drivers don't see motorcycles that are actually in sight. And I'll also explain why it is that high-vis clothing and day riding lights have proven less than successful at preventing junction collisions in the way that we're told they will. And what we'll conclude with is some ideas about some proactive measures that you can include in your own riding. So it's not only a course which fills in a huge and necessary gap in rider knowledge, in my opinion, these are the most common collisions that motorcyclists will have, but it also explains what we can do to stay out of trouble. So that's Wednesday, the 6th of April, just a week away, in fact, at 8 p.m. in the evening. Tickets are £5. All the funding that from those basically goes straight back into supporting the Science of Being Seen project. So, right, okay, on with some news. The first thing to say is that a deal has been reached between the UK and the US, which suspends retaliatory tariffs on imported American products, which you may recall was imposed on Levi jeans, bourbon, and rye whiskey, and Harley Davidsons. Now, it all happened back in 2018, when there was a dispute between the European Union, of which the UK was then a part, of course, and the Trump administration. The Trump administration imposed tariffs on imported steel and aluminium from the EU, and the tariffs placed by the EU were a response to that. Now, what's happened is that under the agreement which now exists between the UK and the US will replace that 25% tariff on steel with a quota system. And in response, the UK will suspend the so-called rebalancing measures, which it was introduced on those US products, including the motorcycles. So it could lead to potentially cheaper bikes if you're a Harley fan. I'm not sure if it applied to Indian or just Harley Davidson, but anyway. The agreement was reached apparently in Washington on March the 22nd, and the tariffs will be removed in June. So don't expect bikes to go shooting down in the showrooms just yet, or for your bottle of bourbon to get suddenly cheaper. It will take just a few days yet. So look for those reductions in June. Maybe hold off if you're planning a new bike purchase. Right, so motorcycles are incredibly versatile things, and one of the things that obviously we like to see is motorcycles being used practically in ways that expand our understanding of what they can do. And if I can manage to get the picture up, I had it up earlier and it's disappeared. You will see that what we have here are some scooters. There we go. Which you can see are equipped with fire extinguishers. If I just now this firefighting equipment, it has been mounted to a total of 7 scooters over in Vietnam. It's just one police department, and there are 2 fire extinguishers per bike, presumably one on either side. That would make sense, wouldn't it? And some of these bikes are going to be actually out on regular patrols. Some will be stationed at busy locations, and the idea is to allow the traffic police, who they say are often first on the scene at small fires and the sort of thing that may turn into a bigger fire at a later date. But car crashes is one problem where cars catch fire, but also they cited in the report market stalls where they have sort of heaters and burners and things for cooking. Sometimes they result in a fire on the market stall, which can spread. So the police are often first there, and they can offer assistance with these fire extinguishers beyond simply directing traffic and telling people to get out of the way, basically. They have been taught how to use them. They have had instructions from the local fire prevention and rescue bureau. I know that 1 or 2 forces in the UK have mounted fire extinguishers on bikes, specifically for tackling fires that have started in awkward to reach places. The sort of some of the fires which have sort of kids pile up rubbish and set fire to it, but that can spread and cause major fires, grass fires. So I know some fire and rescue services in the UK have gone down that route, but as far as I know, there aren't very many of them. Right, okay, don't forget, if you set yourself a reminder, this show goes out every Wednesday and Sunday at 11, live on Facebook here, but you can also catch up with it later here on Facebook, but also over on my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK, where all the shows are actually listed, along with all my other videos as well. So if you do miss one live, you can catch up at a later date. So, right, okay, what else have we got to say? Well, on Monday, the government actually released their infrastructure plan for electric vehicles. It's a strategy plan which takes us through till 2030. And one of the key points of that is a plan to establish a network of 300,000 EV charging points. Now, that's actually 10 times the current number of publicly available chargers, and it's expected to cost no less than £1.6 billion. Now, it's in response to a recognition that the current pace of the rollout is too slow and that public charging network lets people down in terms of reliability and transparency of pricing. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said, no matter where you live, be that a city centre or a rural village, the north, south, east or west of the country, we're powering up the switch to electric and ensuring no one gets left behind in the process. He continued by saying that the plan ensures that the country is EV fit for future generations by the end of this decade, revolutionising our charging network and putting the consumer first. However, the plan instantly drew fire from both MAG, the Motorcycle Action Group, and also the HGV industry. Now, MAG are, of course, against the proposed total phase out of ICE motorcycles, but they do recognise there will be riders who plan to go electric. And their point is that they insist that motorcycles have differing requirements in terms of charging infrastructure, and that under these current plans, what motorcycles require is being ignored. Mags Colin Brown says, for those riders wanting to make the switch to electric, there is insufficient detail in this strategy to reassure. Motorcycles will need dedicated facilities for different ergonomic design and a strong focus on theft security against theft. There is also nothing to indicate that the potential for interchangeable batteries and associated charging hubs has been recognized. Now, I had a quick look at it myself, and basically it's all about the sort of plug-in cables that we're familiar with seeing increasingly on streets and at sort of motorway services, with a view to attaching a car to them. You know, the car parking bays are marked out car size. There are not specific motorcycle bays recommended anywhere. And with more and more bikes coming with removable batteries, yes, the whole idea of having hubs where you can switch from so your nearly empty battery to a refilled one does make an awful lot of sense. Now, that technology has been rolled out in other countries. Now, a similar complaint actually came from HGV operators. The BVRLA chief executive, Jerry Kearney, he said, it's not simply about having more chargers. We need the right solutions placed strategically to be accessible to all drivers. As a sector that buys and operates more than 50% of all EVs in the UK, we'd like to see these priorities acknowledged with more consideration given to appropriate support and interventions. We have particular concerns around charge point accessibility for commercial vehicles and believe that the government needs to start planning for HGV compatible infrastructure as soon as possible. Okay, what do I think about that? Well, basically, with the rapidly increasing uptick in the number of EVs on the road and the end of the road for the ICE not very far away, it's hard to see how just 300,000 charging points is anything like enough. There are currently approaching 40 million vehicles on the road in the UK at the moment, including 1.4 million motorcycles, incidentally. And despite the DFT's claims that charging an electric car will, quote, be easier than refueling a petrol or diesel car, we're still a long way from that position simply because of the time it takes to recharge. Yes, fast chargers may get sort of 80% of the full charge of the battery in an hour or whatever it is that's quoted. Read your own literature. But that's a long, long way from the convenience of a petrol or diesel top up. Now, it's the government have quietly dropped plans to ensure that workplace car parks have charging points. And basically, that what it means really is that the emphasis seems to be shifting towards home charging. Now, that's fine, as I've said before, for houses with garages or driveways, but many of us still live on streets and where we don't have any such facilities. I've repeatedly said I cannot string a 240 volt cable across the pavement. It's just a non-starter. So currently, if you'll pardon the pun, there are just 2 public charging points within a quarter of a mile of where I live. Now, I can't even begin to calculate the number of cars on the streets in between the two, but you know, it's woefully, woefully inadequate. And of course, this leads to the kind of situation that I read about just the other day, which you'll probably laugh at. A Cheltenham councillor drove his newly acquired hybrid Mini Countryman to Lidl, plugged his car into the public charger in the car park, did a little bit of shopping, then walked home with it, leaving his car topping up in the Lidl car park. And he was actually indignant when he was hit by a fine for overstaying the parking time limit. And he argued that it was illogical that owners wouldn't be able to spend long enough in the car park to get the full charge. Now, the answer to that one is pretty damned obvious, really. You're not supposed to be parking your car there to get a full charge. It's a service that gives you a quick boost while you're in the store, and then you move on and you free up the charger for somebody else who's driven to the store and wants a quick top up. But what about when you're on the journey already? Now, right now, it's going to take another year to put a minimum of 6 high-powered charge points at all motorway service areas. Now, 6 is totally inadequate. Go and have a look at the average petrol station in any motorway services and see how many vehicles are refueling at any one moment. I can almost guarantee you it will be more than 6. And again, if you think about the throughput of 5 minutes to fill your car, and with fuel, and how long it takes to get a charge off of an electric charger, it's a totally inadequate number. Even by 2035, there will only be 6,000 charge points on the entire England motorway network. Um, and once again, the press release from the government says that charging an EV will be cheaper than petrol. Well, yes, okay, right now it is, and it's a carrot being used to draw people away from from fossil fuel to electric vehicles. But you have to remember where the government gets a significant amount of its revenue from, and that is duty on fuels. There is no way that the government can absorb the hit to their finances that would come with providing duty-free fuel. Effectively, that's what the electricity is, once people shift in significant numbers away from fossil fuels. So it's either going to have to go on the fuel, the electricity as you charge it through a differential pricing scheme. Smart meters can do that, or there will be road pricing, so you're charged on the distance that you drive. Um, Anyway, um, the final question I've got on that one is, why is this coming out of the public purse when it's under particular pressure? I've seen one or two filling stations with the odd EV charging point, but why is it that the oil companies themselves are not moving to equip more forecourts? If they can't sell petrol, what are they going to sell when the fossil fuel vehicles reach the end of the road? They're going to have to move forward, and frankly, I think that that's who should be sorting that out. Right, anyway, that's my little rant on that subject. Don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, if you find the topics useful, do head over to my coffee page. You can support me over there. £3 buys you access to around 800 motorcycling articles, better biking articles. So do come over there. You can be a follower and get free updates on everything that goes on, or you can subscribe on a regular basis as well. So there are 3 tiers of support there. Right now, one of the things that we're definitely used to here in the UK is filtering between queues of traffic. But over in the US, they are not nearly so keen on the idea of motorcyclists making progress when the cars are all jammed up. But if you happen to be lucky enough to live in Arizona, a new law is coming in that will allow motorcyclists to get to the front of a queue by riding between lanes of traffic. Now, the bill was approved by Arizona's House and Senate earlier this month, and Governor Doug Ducey has just signed it into law. The law will take effect 90 days after the legislature ends this year's session. I'm not quite sure when that is, but it does mean it's not immediate, but it is coming soon. Now, there are some fairly strict rules about what you can and can't do. So let me just get that picture up on screen. First of all, the maneuver can only be made on roads with a speed of 45 miles per hour or less, which rules out most of the major highways and certainly sort of things like interstates. Secondly, it's only legal to pass where there are 2 or more lanes going in the same direction. As the picture shows, you can slide between the queues of traffic going the same way, but what you can't do is what's perfectly legal in the UK, which is pass between opposing directions of traffic. The third factor is that the traffic must actually be at a standstill. If it's moving, you have to stay in the queue. And the maximum speed at which you can pass the traffic is a fairly sensible 15 miles per hour. Now, Arizona's new law takes much of its language from recent legislation which went through in Utah and Montana, which allows for this lane filtering. Although Montana, you can actually ride up to 20 miles per hour. Now, just to confuse everyone who's not local to Utah, the local government website clarifies things. Lane filtering is different from lane splitting. Utah's lane filtering law is very different from California's lane splitting law. Which left me totally baffled until I found an explanation elsewhere. Filtering is defined as riding between stationary traffic, but lane splitting is riding between lines of moving traffic. which just heaps confusion on confusion, frankly, for the Brits. But we just tend to refer to everything as filtering and lane splitting as riding between lanes going in the same direction. But hey ho. Um, Proponents of the move say that it's definitely a step in the right direction, and they point up the crash where bikes at the back of a stationary queue are hit from traffic coming from behind. I'd be interested to know actually how often that does happen. I know it's something that gets flagged up regularly, but to my knowledge, in the UK, far more motorcycles run into the backs of cars than the other way round. But anyway, I'd still say it's a step in the right direction. Oregon and Washington states, they also have their own legislation in the works, but at the moment it's still held up in the legal system and under debate. But if you're in any of these three states that I've just mentioned, Arizona, Utah, and Montana, don't try it on a trike. That's not legal, unless it's a Nikon, maybe. I don't know. Right, anyway. The thing I would say about purchasing parts for motorcycles is that I don't like putting my hand in my pocket. It's a courier thing. You're always trying to minimize the expense. Even as an instructor, I'm always trying to keep the costs down because that helps me keep the cost of the courses down, frankly. So if you look at my bikes, you won't find any anodized bits. There are no replacement engine bolts. There are no sort of aftermarket levers, no fancy LED indicators or strangely shaped mirrors. Whatever is on the bike is pretty much what Mr. Yamaha actually bolted onto it. So I tend to leave things well alone because generally speaking, what the original manufacturer fits actually works. I have tried replacing mirrors, for example, in the past. When I thought it would be cool to have different mirrors and discovered that the standard ones didn't vibrate and the replacement ones, of course, did. And then there was one where the lens fell out altogether after a day. That wasn't much success. So I do tend to save my money for necessary upgrades, like the rear shock replacement that I've had on the Yamaha for a couple of years now. Must write a report on that, actually. But the other day, an ad dropped into the virtual pile for a couple of bits of plastic that, well, I think they're well overpriced. They're $599 US, and that's a sale price. But they might have actually had me dipping into my wallet if I owned the bike they fit. Now, let me get the photo up for you of the bike that I'm in question. Here it is. It is the KTM 390 Adventure. Now, it's a popular little bike. Quite a few people seem to have invested in them. I know a number of people from the motorcycle forum who generally ride much bigger motorcycles who bought one of these as a sort of a runabout and discovered how much fun a small, lightweight, pokey motor is. So there's definitely some very positive points for the KTM there, right up until you look at the styling. Look at that sort of weird mantis-like light and screen, which is sort of hung out on a bracket in front of the bike, so it doesn't move when the bars do, and that huge gap behind it to the petrol tank. It looks very much like that the cowling was never properly finished, and that this sort of hole, this rather nasty gap, would have been filled with some trim, but for some reason it never got put in. I mean, it almost looks like the tank is actually shaped to accept a sort of piece of trim around it. So if it was designed in and it's gone missing, my guess it would probably keep the cost down rather than styling, because it is a ghastly, horrible thing to look at. So this is what I saw online, and it's very simple. It's a couple of small pieces of side panel which go in to the gap and fill the hole. So let's just zoom in there. Okay, they're not desperately pretty. They're just dark coloured fiberglass, but they fill that hole, and they do actually make the thing look like an integrated piece of design rather than something that sort of either part of the fairing dropped off or somebody's just bolted it on in front of the forks. The They come from Rebel X Sports, and they're claimed to improve both the aerodynamics of the bike, well, I can believe that, with that whacking great hole, and better stability at high speed. Well, I've certainly never ridden one of these bikes, so I can't tell you about whether or not there are any stability issues. But certainly those, what they call handmade fiberglass fairing panel kit, does dramatically change the look of your adventure bike, in my opinion. The only downside is that fairly ridiculous price tag. I don't normally think that spending upwards of £500 on bits of trim is a great idea, but in this case, I think actually if I had one of those bikes, it does make a big enough difference to the styling that I might actually consider it. Another bike that you may be interested in riding at some point is the Triumph 660 Tiger. Let me just get you the link up so you can have a look at that. Now, a couple of years ago, I booked a seat on the Triumph Trident 660 UK test tour, and they took their bikes around the UK to a number of different locations. But unfortunately, I had to cancel because I just had an op when the date actually came up, and I'd been told very firmly by the surgeon that I shouldn't be riding for 3 months while the wound healed. Now, I'd actually quite fancied a ride on this 80 horsepower 660 triple, but for one reason or another, I never managed to organise another test ride. But I did notice earlier this week that the 660 Tiger is now being toured around the UK. So here is the list of dates for you. Let me just zoom in a little bit on that so it's a bit easier to see, and I'll scroll the list up. So there we go. The first couple you'll notice, Triumph Birmingham and Staffordshire, have passed, but the next one is West Yorks at the weekend, and then you've got a whole bunch of other dates and locations across England and Wales there, some in Scotland as well, right down to the final one in York in the middle of June. So hopefully, unless you live in the far southwest, which doesn't seem to be catered for at all, there is a slot there for you to go and ride your bike. There seem to be plenty of slots still available. You can also try the unrestricted full Monty 660 or the A2 compliant 46.6 35 kilowatt restricted version. 7 sessions with these bikes each day, so with a bit of luck you'll find a slot near you if you want to test ride the bike. Now, unfortunately, having booked one locally, I suddenly realised that in fact I was giving a presentation down in the West Country, so I'll actually be heading off to Devon and Cornwall when that test ride was booked, so I've had to cancel it about 10 minutes after I booked it, which is a bit of a pain. So if anybody does book a ride on the 660 Tiger or has knowledge of it, I would love to hear a little bit more about it. Right, okay, so I've got a couple of comments to look at. Terry, good morning, Terry, didn't see you there. He says he's about to order a pair of overpriced plastic bark busters. Yes, on his giant killing RV 200. Yeah, there's another bit to, for injection molded plastic and a couple of bolts to put it all together. I know motorcycle kit is ridiculously priced. And Kevin has just commented on the electric infrastructure problem. Yes, I think there will be. I think we'll get it all sorted out eventually, but I do suspect with people being very sanguine about this and hoping it will be right on the night, and I suspect that we will find problems with it. I suspect there'll be a lot of people hanging on to either a sort of hybrid or a petrol engine car for a long time. If the petrol doesn't go up too much or disappear completely. Right, okay, so that brings us towards the final point of the show today, a discussion point really. Have a look at this little gadget here, if I can get the picture up. Dum-de-dum-de-dum, there it is. Okay, so what's that you're looking at? You're probably wondering. Well, it's actually a servo unit for power steering for a motorcycle. Basically, the steering stem goes through the middle of the big bit, and the little cylinder is the electric motor which operates the servo. Now, we're probably all know that power steering is a common technology on cars, but Yamaha are adapting it for use on both on-road and off-road motorcycles. Now, last week you may also remember I featured a three-cylinder radial aero engine, possibly the least motorcycle-shaped engine there is, and an attempt to shoehorn this 2-litre monster engine into an elongated chassis for a world speed record attempt. Well, I did wonder why anybody would bother with that, and I have to say, when I saw the story about the Yamaha power steering, that was my first thought too. Why bother about it? Um, the motorcycles over the last few years have been getting more and more technological upgrades. And kind of the question that begs is, why are we doing this? The development of petrol engines has pretty much stalled. Probably without some major redesigns to the internal combustion engine, they're pretty much as good as they can get. But you could do something like, I don't know, variable valve timing is something that you find on a lot of cars, but it would add weight and complexity to a motorcycle engine. But why do we need power steering? Well, it's a very good question. Um, basically one of the suggestions is that the system could be useful on off-road bikes to reduce steering effort at slow speed. Um, and the writer pointed up that bikes used off-road generally tend to have fairly wide handlebars compared with road bikes to give you that extra leverage. But that's the whole point. You can use your muscles, and if you give it a wide bars, yeah, you just get a bit of more leverage. Is the wide bar an issue really anywhere? I suppose if you're using an enduro bike in a wood or something like that, then possibly the wide bars could sort of clip a tree or something. I've certainly got, when I've been doing a bit of off-road riding, I've certainly managed to get a brake lever hooked up in a tree, and that brought the bike to a very quick halt. And they're also vulnerable when you drop them. I certainly bent handlebars when I've dropped a bike on the handlebar. So yeah, possibly making the bars a little bit narrower could be a benefit, and if they powered up the steering with the this gadget, maybe that would be an advantage, but it seems a pretty marginal use to me. Um, the other suggestion was it could offer some kind of steering damping effect at high speeds. The unit would measure what the rider was trying to put in, and it would detect when the bike was doing something that it wasn't supposed to do in response to the rider's effort and damp it down. And in fact, this technology has been used in the past, apparently, the sort of electromagnetic um, steering damping. I don't know much about it, but the the idea is that you could have a sort of a power up to your steering at low speed, and then a sort of a system that damps the steering at higher speeds. But again, do we really need it? Um, I c If you're riding at competition level, maybe it would help. But somebody said it would take out the fatigue of riding and on big, heavy motorcycles. Well, I remember jumping onto a Harley Davidson not too many years ago, just for to see what it was like. Somebody offered me a ride, so I thought, hey ho, why not? Um, and although the bike was monstrously heavy, one thing I really noticed was it was not hard work to steer. It was really surprisingly light. So you can keep the steering light without compromising the ability to maneuver the bike. It was actually a bit of a doddle to ride at low speed. Was surprised at just how easy it is. So the idea that big heavy cruisers and touring bikes take lots of effort, I'm not so sure about. The usual problem is actually going to be interpreting what the rider was intending to do. You how are you going to detect a rider who is trying to steer positively with counter steering, and somebody who doesn't really understand what counter steering's doing, and he sort of wobbles the steering to get it destabilized so it falls over in the right direction they want. It was how I steered for the first few years of my riding career. I really didn't understand how the system works. Um, the counterintuitiveness of motorcycle steering is a real problem, I think, for a system like this to understand. Yamaha claims that the experience is seamless, that they've been able to achieve this power steering. Um, I'm still doubtful that it would work, particularly with riders who use different techniques for steering. I mean, I posted something online the other day about a number of different ways that people believe motorcycles steer. Everything from hanging off to the inside of a corner to pushing the bars down. You try pushing the bars down, and obviously the bars aren't going to turn, and your power steering's not going to kick in, is it? So I'm not convinced that this is not just sort of overcomplication for the sake of overcomplication. I really, really don't think that's a technology that we need. It's not a technology I even think we ought to see on motorcycle. Yeah, Terry says, yeah, sounds like Boeing's fatally flawed system. Yes, I can see that sort of problem arising where the system thinks you want to do one thing and tries to make the bike do it when in fact you want to do something completely different. Right, okay, so that's it today. Relatively short show after a couple of slightly over long ones in the last couple of weeks. I'll just leave you with that reminder that the Science of Being Seen is on Wednesday next week. You've got a week to book that one up. And the other thing I wanted to say was that my training courses are booking. I've got fairly busy month ahead in April already. I'm already starting to look to take bookings into um, um, I'm confusing myself now here. May, yes, of course, May. April is followed by May. I've completely lost the plot of what I was going to say there. So, if you are interested in the course, spring is here. It was lovely and sunny and beautifully warm just a day or two ago. It suddenly turned a bit chillier, but we can hope for the warmer weather to return fairly soon. So, if you are interested in thinking about a course, do drop me a line. If you head over to my coffee page, the link that I gave you earlier, you will find that there are a couple of info brochures over there in the shop, which you can download for nothing, which will tell you a little bit more about the courses. Right, that is it for me today. I've done enough waffling. If you're out there on the roads today, do ride safe and stay shiny side up.